Hey, so by popular request, I had a few students ask, and I'm now making videos based on requests from students of things they would like me to demonstrate. Now, obviously, um, there are certain things I can't do. Like I had a student ask if I could demonstrate welding. I don't have a welder here, so I can't quite do that. Um, I just don't have the setup for it. But I did have glass beads, so I was able to do glass bead making. But today, I'm going to demonstrate, by request, tie-dye. So, a few things about tie-dye. Dyeing is an art form that can be found around the world in various cultures. And rather than even just making just a plain colored cloth or a single color, a lot of cultures have found ways to create patterns in a cloth with their dyeing process. And when I say dyeing, I don't mean dead. I mean dyeing as in taking pigment and sticking and bonding it to the fibers, the little pieces of cloth, the threads that make up the cloth. So we know, we've talked about in class, there's lots of different types of fibers out there. There's cotton, which I know you've seen grown around where we live. There's silk, which is made by silkworms, and there's a whole bunch of synthetic fabrics out there as well. There's wool from sheep. Alpaca come up with kind of like a hairy fur. It's not quite called wool, but it kind of has the warmth of wool. But today we're going to look at cotton. Cotton takes commercial dyes really well, and that's what we're working with today. Is just some regular commercial liquid dye that you could get just from about any big store out there, department store. You can even get it online, or even like different craft supply stores. I have gloves. These are very hard to come by. Um, I didn't have to go out and get them because I always have kept a box, and it's not too often I need gloves for a project, but when I do, I have them, and I try not to waste them. So right now, I'd rather we not try to go out and buy gloves, but at least I can show you how to do this. And when things get more back to normal where you can get supplies like this, cool, then you can try it. So I'm going to show you today how to do just a very basic standard spiral type of tie-dye. Now, tie-dye became really popular in the US in the 60s with a lot of young people, but there are a lot of cultures, like I said, that do dyeing processes similar to tie-dye. Like in Japan, they do a technique called shibori, and they use a really dark blue dye that's made from plants that goes through a whole process to create that dye in those dye baths to turn the cloth blue and white. So the white is the cotton, and the blue is the dye. So that's kind of the color I'm going with today. I mixed a little blue and purple to give us kind of an indigo color today. And I've got some cotton t-shirts. And we're going to go ahead and get started. To resist it, we're not using wax. We're not tying really tight threads. There's a lot of different ways you can create what's called a resist. Instead, just by folding it, you make it harder for the dye to get into those creases. And this is kind of loose. So if I put this in the dye bath, it's so loose that it might just, I don't know, turn the whole thing blue without any of those cool looking white spots. But the more rubber bands I put on this, the tighter it's going to squeeze, the harder it is for that dye to get into that cloth. Now, this is where art and science kind of combine. I've had students ask me, well, how do you get exactly the color you want? Because if you read the bottle and it says navy, well, what's that look like? Well, I could go off and give you what I think it might look like, but that's me guessing. Now, if I've used the color navy a lot, I probably have an educated guess, meaning I've already played around with it. I know what to expect to get consistent results, but if I don't, well then I don't have an educated guess, I'm just guessing. Now, obviously I'm not just grabbing bottles with my eyes closed and going, okay, I'm going to dump it in. I am reading it, seeing if it's red or blue or purple, but it's still not as exact as if I knew it because I'm familiar with it. And that's where artists start to get really good at what's called their craft. Not just did they take their time and do it carefully, like I'm carefully rubber banding this up now, kind of equally. Kind of reminds me of an S-carbuncle, which is this 8-sided thing. That I'm not going to explain to you guys, or I can go on tangents forever. All right, so what I'm talking about is the scientific process and scientific method means when you run an experiment, you have controls. It means you know the variables. It means you know what's different each time you do it and what's the same. So when you change one thing, did it have an effect? And you might have to do that multiple times to make sure you didn't have a mistake, or make sure it wasn't the weather, or maybe there was something with the water that day, or maybe you got a different batch of cotton shirts that it was processed a little differently. So you need to kind of do a lot of samples. Well, in the arts, you need to practice quite a lot with those materials and techniques to understand that you're getting what you want accomplished. Now, the smaller this gets and the tighter this gets, see how it's kind of flat? Oh, see on the back? See, that would be covering up all of that spiral. So I can kind of work it back here into the edge. And again, this takes practice of doing these kind of things. The first time I did tie-dyeing, it was with my mom, with the Girl Scouts in the basement of my elementary school. And I think the whole thing came out brown. I don't think it really worked very well. And I don't blame the people helping us or my mom or anything like that. They hadn't done much of it. And it takes practice to do, just like anything. So you can see all the lines of the folds there. You can see all the lines of the folds here. We don't have pieces of the shirt blocking it. That means that we're going to get good contact where we want it. Kind of squish it up a little bit. But the scientific process and controlling an experiment is very similar to honing your skills as an artist with the creative process. So for instance, you might get really good at tie-dye, and you might get your process, how you like to do it, to get the effects you like down quickly. Someone might say, well, how long does it take you to do a shirt? And you could be like, not that long, because you got a system down. Well, you had to practice to get that system down. You had to make a lot of mistakes or do it in ways that didn't quite work right and find ways to change it, whether it be how you put the rubber bands on or how you take them off. But more so, even once we're done dyeing it and you take the rubber bands off, what do? Now, I've read a bunch of different things, and I've tried a couple different things with students, and I find that, there's more than one right way to finish your shirt. You just want to be careful that the first couple times you wash it afterwards, there's a good chance that the dye will run off onto other items in your washer. So wash it by itself, or even hand wash it, thoroughly dry it on high in your dryer. That helps. I like to let it dry completely with the dye in it and not rinse it. Some people rinse it. Rinsing it doesn't hurt it. I just don't find that if I have the ability to just dry it and put it aside, it helps when I'm doing a whole bunch of shirts. And if not, it might be better to rinse it. Anyway, here we go. So I'm getting this very, very tight. So it's all compressed in. And again, this is science and physics, because the more it compresses, the tighter those fibers are together, the more the dye is going to have trouble getting down into those fibers. But that creates the contrast between the undyed sections of the shirt and the dyed sections of the shirt. Now, you might find, if you try this, that some shirts you might want to pre-wet with water, and other shirts you might not. You might find that you like to rinse it afterwards. There's even methods of tie-dye out there that use ice. I haven't done those, but they seem pretty cool. I have played around with some natural dyes, and they're a lot of fun. And I can go all into mordants and tannins and things from nature that kind of set with different fabrics and different methods, but I just want to keep this really simple today. So, let you know the rabbit hole is deep, meaning there's a lot to learn about this. But to get this, you have to start here. And when you start here, you're just going to take your fingers, and you're going to twist it up, and you're probably like, why are you wearing these gloves for this? I usually don't wear the gloves for this part, but I didn't want to have to put them on midway. But see how I'm twisting it up? It's kind of like a hurricane. Ooh, because we're familiar with that. All right. So you just keep twisting it, twisting it, twisting it, twisting it, twisting it, until it looks like a cinnamon bun or a pecan twist. Or sometimes people say pecan twist. Here, I'll show you what a pecan twist looks like. Let's see. Kind of like that. Yeah. All right. All right, so once you get that up in a spiral, that's when you start rubber banding it. And this could be one of the trickier parts. So what I do is I just kind of slide one over loosely, and I start building it up just like we did this one here. All right, so here we go. What I'm going to do is dunk it. But before I do that, I've added the dye in, but I need it to be nice and hot. So I have on my stove just behind the camera, I have a tea kettle full of hot water. So I'm going to pour that water in first, and then I'm going to dunk it in here and get the dye exposed to the fabric. Also, I'm going to hang this shirt back out outside, and I'm going to use this bowl to transfer and carry the new piece to so it doesn't drip all over my house. Normally, I would do this outside with a lot of different colors. Today, I'm just doing one color, but I didn't get to pick the weather today, and today it's raining. It is pouring buckets of water outside. So I decided I would do this very messy project here at my desk where you can see. Woo-wee. Try not to splash that. That's very hot water. And as always, have adults' permission and supervision if necessary at your house. And almost every parent is going to want that, so talk to them first. Now, here's the dye. Here's the fabric. This is the bowl it's going to go into. You can tell I pulled rubber bands off from the last dye project before. And so I'm going to kind of hold it by the rubber bands because it is so hot. I'm just going to dunk it down, just like that. That's a very pretty purpley blue indigo color, like that. And see how I left like a stripe undyed? I'm going to leave that because I kind of like that. And give it a little squeeze, little squeeze, little squeeze. And even just holding it like this, even though it's not dripping wet, it's very hot. So I'm going to kind of try to work quickly. Now I'm going to pull the rubber bands off. And the rubber bands were on so tight, they even resisted the dye a little bit, which is a lot like the shibori method. Now there's a really cool method of dye resist techniques, meaning it keeps the dye from getting to certain parts of the cloth. In Thailand and in Indonesia called batik, and batik uses wax. Much like in Russia where they do Pisanki eggs, they use wax to resist the dye. All right, let's see how this came out. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of white spots in it, but that's okay. Oh, that's pretty. And everyone's going to be a little bit different. And until you practice and make a couple different shirts and try them in different ways, you're not going to have exactly the most precise control until you know how long to put it into the dye, if you want more purple, less purple, that kind of thing. But I like this. The other one had a lot more blue and purple pushed into it. And this one has a lot more white, but it still came out quite lovely. You can see the rubber band marks on the bottom. That's pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to take my bowl here, and I'm going to leave my dye bowl here. And I'm going to go hang this outside and let it dry on the clothesline on my porch. There's a little roof over it. Hopefully it at least won't get rained on. But I hope that gives you a good explanation of tie-dye and how that works. And if I do get some sunnier weather this weekend, I'll be sure to do some tie-dye with more colors and even some more patterns that you can fold into the project. So if you have any requests for art projects or media you'd like me to demonstrate, just go ahead and give me an email or let me know in Google Classroom or meet with me in Zoom and let me know your request. I'm even doing demonstrations during Zoom for students that want to meet up and have me do demos there, so you can ask me questions in real time. But I hope you have a fantastic weekend and have a great day.